The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike, here with Sam. Sam, how you doing?
I am doing well, Mike. Fresh off of a cloudy 2024 total solar eclipse. We are recording on this lovely Monday afternoon immediately after. I just got to witness the first solar eclipse of my lifetime. And fitting that now we get to talk about the Phoenix Suns and what they've been doing with basketball recently, too.
And what did you think? You're in one of the areas. We only got a partial eclipse here in Arizona, so you're in an area where it was a total eclipse. How was it?
It was, so I saw like 30 million people in the U.S. were affected, were in the path of totality or whatever, and so I'm one of the 30 million, and it was literally, I think, if not 90%, then 100% cloud cover. I did not see the sun. So I thought that was pretty funny in just kind of a cosmic way. What I will say is the actual 4 minutes of totality that we got, the 4 minutes of darkness, was very cool. And it was cool to like be around other people, and, you know, birds were going crazy. Wildlife, I think, was tricked into thinking that it was nighttime. So that was like very much an eerie feeling. But yeah, for the most part, definitely not the experience I think that I was sold or was hoping for out of like a once in a lifetime or once in a generation event. The sun let me down today a little bit, as it tends to do. Like it was 2022 Game 7 against the Mavs or something. It was kind of a parallel experience to that.
Since the last time we recorded, speaking of the Phoenix Suns, 3-1 for the Suns as far as main feed podcasts. A win against New Orleans where Devin Booker had 52 points. A win against Cleveland, 40 from Booker in that one. A pretty awesome win against Minnesota in a game that I was at, a Friday night game a few days ago. And then the loss, this is the curse of the podcast, really, the loss against New Orleans on playback yesterday, Sunday, April 7th, which, of course, we have to record after the loss. But overall, a good week for the Phoenix Suns in that they are now currently in the 6th seed. They did beat New Orleans at least once, meaning they own the tiebreaker against New Orleans. They're currently tied as far as records go, and if they continue to win, they will hold that 6th seed, and we can talk about how they're playing. I do want to talk about just going to that game in Minnesota, just some notes that I had from going to that game. Is that an okay place to start here?
That's definitely, yeah. I mean, I feel like I've been asking you to do so many playbacks, or we've been asking you to do so many playbacks this year that you haven't actually made it out to a Suns game until this weekend, right? So how was it?
Usually I go to like a few, like 5 or more games a season, but this was the first game that I got to go to in person this season, and they only have one more. Tuesday is the last home game of the season, and then they end, as far as regular season games, of course, and then they end the season on a 3-game road trip. And first of all, I will say that I had 2 options to go to because I was planning on going to one this weekend, Minnesota or New Orleans. Happy I went to Minnesota, first of all. Started the game on a 15-0 run and then just kind of held that lead for the rest of the game. And I had a great time, first of all. It's a really nice game to watch in person. A couple of the notes that I had, I don't think that the music or sound effects are as loud as Steve Kerr implied. I think that he's just an old man that is mad at loud noises. I don't think it was any louder than it was last season. I know some people have said that it was. In my experience, I did not notice that. Maybe they adjusted the speakers since the middle of the season, but I didn't notice anything about that. There is some. Have you noticed that there's been some hand wringing about the Suns crowd this year? That they should be louder, they should be more enthusiastic at home games. Have you heard that from people online? I've seen a little bit of that.
I've seen maybe a little bit of it from people online. I haven't seen it from any of the players or inside the organization. right? Like I can't recall seeing any of that.
There was one interview where Grayson Allen said that he would like the Suns crowd to cheer them when they're down in the fourth.
Yeah, players say
Instead
that.
of get a little,
But players say that all the time about struggling teams. Didn't he give that interview when they were like, I don't know, 500? Like, I feel like it was a while.
Yeah,
ago.
that was like December.
It's like
it was
you guys didn't deserve to be cheered at that point in time, quite frankly, and you have to earn it a little bit. Well, okay, so what was your impression of the crowd then?
I went to a Friday night game, which I think is impactful of that, and I thought the crowd was really great. I don't think there's a ton of Minnesota presence, like as far as their fans. I saw a few Timberwolves fans. Of course, there's always fans of the other team in any arena, but I don't think that was like a large presence. I think if you're playing Boston or New York or one of the bigger cities, there tends to be other fans. Not really a problem at the game that I went to, so I thought it was a really good crowd overall. I do think there's an element of a lot of people remember the 2021 run. That's like the most impactful run in Devin Booker's career, right? The most interesting run of a recent Suns team. And the crowd was just incredible throughout that entire playoff run. So I think there's a lasting memory of that crowd and just the highs and the peaks that it hit. And there is no comparing any regular season crowd to that. So I do think there is some conflation of what a normal regular season game crowd is like and what it used to be like in the past, because I don't think the 2021 regular season crowd was any better than this year's regular season crowd.
Okay.
It feels essentially exactly the same.
That's good to hear.
I do think there is a little bit of fourth quarter fear from the crowd once the fourth quarter starts, just because you're bombarded with stats about the Suns being the worst fourth quarter team constantly. So I do think there's a little bit of that. But overall, I thought the crowd was pretty great. I don't know if that comes through in the broadcast at all.
I think there's some fourth quarter fear that you can feel in the way that the players play too. We've been talking about that for months, right? So psychologically, it's almost a natural instinct at this point. We would expect to see it in the fans as well as the players, as well as the coaches. They've been a bad fourth quarter team all season long. They had a couple of decent fourth quarters lately. Was it the Minnesota game actually that they were having a good fourth quarter until they checked in their garbage time guys, and then Minnesota went on a 13-0 run or something?
Yeah, the Suns have no offense in their garbage time guys. There's just nothing.
I mean, look, IT tried. I think
he shot one shot, I think, and missed it. But I think overall, I thought the crowd they take after the players. I think you're exactly right that there's just an element. If the players look like they're a little bit nervous in the fourth quarter, I think over time the fans will learn that behavior and reflect that energy right back to them.
Also, how many times have we said just that, like, the fan excitement is a function of expectations, and from that point of view, there's no comparison between 2021, the first year that they truly ascended, and no one kind of expected them to be in the position that they were in, versus this year, where, look, I think things have gotten a lot better as of late. I think we can talk about this team with a little bit of renewed optimism now in a way that maybe we haven't been able to recently, and I'm excited to get into it. But plain and simple, they are not where we've wanted them to be. And, of course, that's going to reflect in kind of the fan attitude at games.
Yeah, I agree with that. Last couple things. I think seeing Kevin Durant's shooting in person is always just insane. And in that Minnesota game where everyone was kind of throwing up rocks on both teams, he was just, all of his shots were difficult, and he was still insanely efficient in that game, and that was really impressive. And then lastly, I think the reason I wanted to go to this game, other than Minnesota being one of the best teams in the NBA so far this season, is I think the perceived, I don't know if you want to call it a rivalry or whatever it is, between Anthony Edwards and Devin Booker, and just seeing them play against each other. And I thought that was a fascinating thing. The combination of the athleticism of Anthony Edwards, and I think in this particular game, something that Anthony Edwards lacks is playmaking, and then you saw a lot of that out of Devin Booker. I think he ended the game with 13 assists.
Yeah, it's interesting because actually both guys had really poor shooting nights, which you don't see too often. You'd expect at least one of them to be, I don't know, giving you their usual 50, 40 something. Ant shot 6 of 19, and Book shot, let me check the box score real quick, he shot 3 of 12, but Book had 13 assists and Ant had 3. So there is an obvious difference in playmaking and what the two guys can do. And you compound that for Minnesota on Ant is a guy who you can throw to at the ball, and he doesn't necessarily have the same playmaking chops. And Cat is still out. Now it is being speculated now that maybe he can even return in time for the playoffs.
Yeah, right.
But when they're having nights where Ant isn't giving you what you're expecting and Cat is not there, obviously they're going to struggle really mightily to create any sort of offense. They have Mike Conley. Mike Conley has had a pretty good season. He did not do anything in the game against the Suns. So, yeah, I mean, holding Minnesota to 87 is – I know we've been talking about how, like, refs are swallowing their whistles and there aren't any calls on either side of the ball. Point per game, totals, offensive ratings are down across the board. Even so, holding a team like Minnesota at 87 points is really a great evidence of some defensive progress for the Suns.
And, just on Devin Booker only taking 12 shots in that game in general, the strategy that they went with that I thought was interesting, ideally, I think we would have seen them try to defend the Suns fully healthy, Karl Anthony Towns on Kevin Durant, and then you see kind of what they do with a guy who can't guard him, basically. But in this game, I thought what was interesting that they did defensively for most of the game, what they attempted to do against the Suns was put their longer, taller defender in Jaden McDaniels on Devin Booker to try to take him out. Admittedly, his last 2 games, he scored 92 points. So, they were trying to figure out a way to stop a guy who was insanely hot going into that game, and then put their shorter, bulkier defender in Anthony Edwards on Kevin Durant. And then, Kevin Durant going into the post, he had a guy who was attempting to try to body up on him as much as possible, but could not really get up and defend his shot. And what you saw is kind of what you would expect with those matchups. With Devin Booker wasn't able to be as efficient, and Kevin Durant, the guy who can kind of shoot over any smaller defender, was ultra efficient. And I thought that was a really interesting strategy to take against the Suns, to put the longer, taller defender on Booker, where you would more expect that person to be on Kevin Durant to try at least to get up there as much as possible to change his shooting form. What do you think of that strategy?
Well, I think if these two teams meet in the first round, and as of now, there's a very, not likely, I wouldn't say any situation is exactly likely right now, but these two teams could play each other in the first round. I think we could see that switch up a little bit for sure if they play, but it makes sense that Minnesota, one of the best defensive teams in the NBA, would at least try. Right, that they're kind of founded on, yes, they have Rudy Gobert in the middle, but then they just have size and length around him, and that they would try to put that versatility to the test against two of the best wing scorers in the NBA in Durant and Booker. Now, of course, Kevin Durant doesn't have a weight advantage over Anthony Edwards, so it's not like he can bully him in the post. KD's not the type of player who bullies anyone in the post, but what is that, a 7-inch height difference, 8-inch
Pretty
height?
big.
Like Ant is short. He's got long ass arms, don't get me wrong, but he's short. He's maybe 6'5". So yeah, obviously KD's able to shoot over him in that matchup, and no surprise KD had a good game. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. The Suns did not have surprised. An incredible offensive performance in this one either,
No.
But they
just
came away with
KD
the win.
really.
That was all that mattered.
Yeah, I think KD was the only one that was ultra efficient, but they are, the best defense in the West right now. So you're playing against a team that's really capable defensively. They have they have one really great perimeter defender in McDaniels, and then Gobert, and then Anthony Edwards, I think, has improved dramatically as a defender, and so that all of that in tandem makes it difficult to score on them. But the Suns, for whatever reason, so far have had their number this year. They do play again the last game of the season in what could be a very important game for both teams. So we'll see how much that one matters. And, maybe it's more likely that it matters for the Suns than it matters for the Timberwolves. So we'll see if they end up resting anybody or taking some time to maybe not play them as many minutes as they normally would. And for the Suns, they need it to make the 6th seed at that point, or maybe they won't. Like, we'll know. It could be a scenario where both teams will actually rest guys, and then we'll see them playing in the first round, depending on the outcome of that game. We got a lot of time before we get there. But
let me just ask you real quick: Are you about to move on from this game, or do you have more to say?
Yeah, I was going to talk generally about the team recently, but yeah, we can stay on it.
Last thing I just want to say about the Timberwolves: say Cat is back for the first round. Which again, it would be a change versus kind of the news that we've been hearing about maybe they would have to make a longer, deeper playoff run in order to get him back. Now it looks like maybe that's changing. Does that change how you feel about wanting Minnesota in the first round if you could choose versus, say, OKC or Denver? Or does it not really do anything for you?
It's no, I think I still would want them overall. You know, the combination of Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns struggle in the playoffs throughout their career, I think, is one of the reasons. I know Karl-Anthony Towns has had one of his best seasons. I think his best season ever this year, just in his scoring and I think and his passing and defense. But doesn't it feel like the Suns are kind of a bad matchup for them a little bit, you know, defensively?
Yeah, it feels,
in that
it feels
Kevin
so
Durant
more that
kind of
way.
makes it a bad matchup for them, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. It feels more so that way than the times in which we've matched up with OKC's 5-out offense and have just really, really struggled to contain what they do. It is still my principal worry. And then Denver's the wild card because obviously Denver institutionally deserves the most respect because of their history. They've performed in the playoffs in a way that these other two teams haven't. But, like, I don't know. I don't want to say they haven't taken the regular season seriously because they have, but, like, their starting five is really good, has a really good net rating when they're all healthy, but overall have just not had the same measure of success in the regular season as these other two teams in OKC and Minnesota when you look at net ratings, when you look at point differentials. And so I don't really know what to make of Denver as they stack up against the Suns. I think if we go into that series, obviously we're the underdog. Again, we deserve to be the underdog. But, like, comparing Denver versus Minnesota is a little bit more challenging for me. I think I would rather play Minnesota and then Denver's second and then OKC's third. But I don't know if everyone shares that opinion.
I think that I sort of feel that way as well, and Denver could make you look so stupid for even thinking about wanting them. Of course,
I don't want them. I'm not going to phrase it that way.
Yeah, of course. It's just that, you know, because the thing about Denver is they've played well at times and they've played worse at times, and some of that is just directly related to injuries. When they're healthy, they play at their best, of course, just like the Suns at times. And if they go into the postseason fully healthy, even if they've kind of been bad, which they haven't, but even if they had for the last like 2-3 weeks of the season, they can turn it on in a way that other teams can't. And we know that because that's exactly what happened last year. They were not great towards the end of the season. Their defense just completely and totally cratered the last month and a half of the season, and then they turned it on in the playoffs in a way that no other team was capable of doing. Whether or not they can do that remains to be seen. It is a slightly different team, although the starting five is exactly the same, and they have a ton of games played together. And I think that's, for the Suns in particular, who has the least amount of time with their starting five playing together, probably of any team in the West, I think that's the biggest worry that you would have.
Trying to think if is there a team with less continuity than the Suns in the West? That is an interesting question right there.
There can't be, right?
You know what's interesting? This Dallas team does not have a lot of continuity. They made a couple big acquisitions at the deadline, getting PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford.
Yeah,
but they're playing their best basketball right now. So those trades absolutely worked out for Dallas. I think a lot of people said at the time, hey, Dallas made good moves, and you're seeing that. Much to my dismay, I don't want to admit that Dallas is playing their best basketball right now, but maybe they flame out in the playoffs based on their lack of continuity. We'll see.
So, the Phoenix Suns right now, 3-1 in their last 4, 7-3 in their last 10 games. And they're starting to they're playing in a way that even in the wins, if you compare wins from like a few months ago or just a few weeks ago to the wins now, they just look better, in my opinion, in that there's so much of what the Suns were doing previously in wins, for example, where they would jump ahead to a massive lead. The other team would cut into that lead. The Suns would have no response, and then they would escape with the win. Whereas, like for the last 3 wins, for example, outside of the New Orleans game, which we will talk about, they were jumping ahead to massive wins, and then the other team would respond, and then the Suns would have a response in them. And I know that's a small thing to point out in the grand scheme of things, because this is, as Eddie Johnson will constantly remind you, a game of runs. But seeing a team have a proper response to when another team kind of punches them in the mouth a little bit is kind of what you need to see from this team in order to feel like they're more comfortable with each other, or they're more capable of winning games that are a little more difficult to win, which I think they've done lately. These are good teams that they're playing. Secondly, I want to talk about is I think the defense, even in the New Orleans game that they lost, but the defense, particularly in the last 4 games, so the last week alone, has reached a level that I think we needed to see in order to believe that they're capable of executing the right kinds of game plans against playoff teams, assuming they, of course, make the playoffs. So in some ways, I'm asking you, are we finally seeing the team that was promised? Now, not quite offensively, at the very least, because I think there's still other levels it can reach. But in some ways, are we finally seeing that of this team in the last, at least 10 games or so?
Yes, I think it's really important to start there, and important that we kind of underscore the entire podcast with this point, which is that, look, I don't know about are we finally seeing the team that we wanted to, because obviously if we could have had it our way, they would have been dominating all this time and blowouts left and right all the time. But this podcast we've been really unlucky 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
3 weeks in a row, we have to come on here on like Monday afternoons, Monday evenings when we usually record weekly, directly after losses. 3 straight losses for you guys. The last 3 losses of this team, we've had to record a main feed podcast after every single one, even though they're 7-3 in their last 10 games. That's just our bad luck. I don't know if we're cursed or what it is, or if the Suns just hate the end of their weekend, start of their work weeks, but they're 7-3 in their last 10. They're 3rd in the NBA in assists per game over those 10 games, averaging close to 30 assists per game. Now, granted, still too many turnovers. I think something that's funny about this team is even when they have a game with 30-plus assists, they'll often still have 17, 18 turnovers. So the ratio isn't quite where you would want it to be, but they are sharing the ball quite a bit better. If you go all the way back to January 1st, they are 7th in the NBA in net rating since the new year. 1 point behind, less than 1 point behind, actually, the OKC Thunder and the Denver Nuggets. 5th in net rating since January 1st is OKC. 6th in net rating since January 1st is Denver. 7th is Phoenix. So are they where we want them to be? I don't know. I think we wanted them to be first and like clearing right? We wanted them to be we wanted them to be the Boston of the West.
Of course.
And it's clear that even now, as they're no longer playing cupcake opponents, they're playing real opponents and they're winning games for real, not just squeaking by 2 points. They're still not the Boston of the West. Okay.
No.
But they do for the first time all season. If you take these last few weeks into account, they look like a team that could win a playoff series. Not that will win a playoff series. I'm not promising anything because they have to go. They're not going to have home court advantage. No matter who
make the playoffs first.
They have to make the playoffs. They still have to stay out of the play-in. But they look like a team now after a few straight good wins in a row against good teams. They look like a team that is capable of knocking off a tougher opponent if things go right for them. Then maybe that portends a deeper playoff run, hopefully, right? So that's a change. It's a reason for optimism. Like, I'm sorry for the fact, I'm not sorry for anything. It's not my fault. But it sucks that this is the 3rd week in a row that we come on here directly after a loss and have to talk about the loss. And yes, we will talk more specifically about the Pelicans' loss in a bit. But team's been pretty good. Let's not lose sight of the fact that the stats back that up right now, basically.
So, why have they looked good, I think, is the question, right? In those last, at the very least, 3-1, because, we recorded before that about the previous week, in which we talked, about the losses and about the good stuff as well. But in this particular one, first of all, Devin Booker, who was, after his ankle injury, not good for a while, whether it was related to that ankle injury or not. In the last week, which is 4 games, 32.5 points per game, 9.2 assists per game, 54, 38, 93. Shooting, I think a chance at the player of the week, which he did not win, but I think he was definitely probably up there as one of the best players in the West in that time span. Obviously, he had the insane scoring games, and then, of course, in the last 2, more of a playmaker. I think the Pelicans, to their credit, did a good job of trying to take his scoring away from him as much as possible in the last Pelicans game in which they lost. But that's a big thing for him to actually come out and just score like he did. I think you put it in the last podcast. We expected him to look a little bit more like he did in the playoffs last year, this season, and this week he did in the last 4 games or so, maybe save for the scoring in the Pelicans game. I think the passing in the Timberwolves games, as frustrating as some of his scoring was, I think he was such a catalyst for a lot of the offense that they did have in that game that I think that one is included. Secondly to that, we haven't talked much about it, but I do think his defense, Devin Booker has improved as a defender essentially every season of his career. I think you could say this season he's gotten a little bit worse as a defender.
Again,
and
it's hard because you're making a direct comparison to I think just naturally you're making a direct comparison to the player he was in the playoffs. And the defender
he was in the playoffs, but also last season I think he was pretty good overall.
You might be right. You might be right, and that's really where I'd have to challenge myself to go back and watch the film. The Devin Booker that stands out in my mind from last year is, again, the guy he was in the playoffs, which
was very good. Yeah.
An all-world defender. Like, this is how insane his playoff run was, is he was giving you 35 a night, absolute buckets, tough buckets too, ethical hoops. We talk about it all the time. And then also, like, 2 steals and a block. And just awesome rotations consistently. And it was like, how do we still lose a series with that guy looking like that? You're still hoping really he finds that level again in the playoffs this year, defensively.
He found it, I think, in the last 4 games or so. The level he was reaching defensively, their ability to, I think, read and react to the offense of other teams and also be prepared for the proper game plans that they were capable of being prepared for in those games, I think, was what really stood out to me, because he was no longer being picked on off the ball, which I do think we have problems with, whether it be backdoor cuts or his overhelping on the ball and then finding shooters from the three-point line. He's still going to help, don't get me wrong, that's his job. Ultimately, when you're the defender like he is and you're not often put directly on the ball, your job is to help guys like Grayson Allen, who are kind of fighting for their lives against often really great offensive players. So he's going to help off the ball quite a bit. But their ability to communicate, and I think Frank Vogel made a point of talking about that this week, in that Devin Booker is one of the louder communicators. Grayson Allen said the same thing in the last week. But their ability to communicate, their ability to communicate and to understand the game plan, which I think is one of Devin Booker's big strengths defensively, is understanding the game plan, knowing where to force guys, and knowing how to get back to guys in the last week or so, is what they need in order to be a great defensive team in the playoffs. And this is ultimately Frank Vogel's strength. We talk about it over and over again. They have to find ways to be a team defensively that is better than the sum of their parts. They're not a bunch of great defenders put together. There's a few of them. There's a few good defenders. There's no terrible defenders, I think, on this team that get minutes at the very least. I don't know if you want to talk about Drew Eubanks here, but we can if you want.
No, I wouldn't say
overall,
Drew, I wouldn't say Drew is a terrible
good
defender. I think that's a little unfair to him. I think he's terrible on offense.
You put them all together, and they can play this level of defense against great teams, which they did in the last few games. And I'm including the Pelicans game, even though they did find ways to score. I do think they had like a really kind of insane shooting night for them, in that, Jose Alvarado hit all his threes and CJ McCollum hit all his threes. That's not going to happen regularly. Were a few of them a little too open? Yeah, they were a little too open. But even in a normal game, those wide open threes don't always go in at the rate that they did. Those are the things that stood out to me. Obviously, Devin Booker playing well offensively, but I think he picked it up defensively as well as the rest of the team.
He picked it up defensively. As we talk about the sustained stretch, I think we just need to also talk about Bradley Beal, who's continued to pick it up defensively, and also had, unfortunately, we wasted the first really good Bradley Beal offensive performance where he was consistently looking for a shot. Yeah. And not even always just looking for a shot. Like, he did make a couple of step back mid-range shots, which was good to see. But also he shot 7 for 8 in that New Orleans game from deep. Most of those just being Bradley Beal playing off the ball and just making everything in sight. And we still lost that game. So that is unfortunate. Yeah. But we've talked about on last week's podcast, he's taken a new role upon himself, and I think overall has done a really good job with it. Has certainly embraced playing better defense with this team. And then, yeah, I mean, the rest of the guys, I would just probably agree with your point that there are no terrible defenders in the top 8 or 9 rotational pieces that we actually anticipate playing in the playoffs. Couple of decisions that you could quibble with. Grayson Allen, I think this is a big one. Royce O'Neal plays 14 minutes last night. He played some really good point of attack defense, I thought, towards CJ or on CJ.
Got some deflections. Yeah.
On CJ McCollum down the stretch. Was kind of the best guy the Suns had for trying to contain CJ at all. Didn't do anything on offense, but didn't really have any opportunities to shoot. At a certain point in the fourth quarter, as we're kind of trying to stage a comeback, Frank makes, I think, what you could argue is the logical decision to go with his starters. Checks Grayson back in the game for Royce. Again, Royce only played 14 minutes. But then Grayson hits, or misses rather, a couple of really wide open, just perfect looks that I think came back to haunt them a little bit. I don't know. Should he have gone realistically with a different look, like a different closing lineup than we're used to seeing in that one? I don't know. I think there are other things that were even worse decisions on the part of Frank last night, but it is just one thing. We know Grayson's not the best defender technically in lineups where the Suns want their best 5 defenders on the floor. He would not be a part of it. So it's just hard when he's missing shots in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, too, just about Royce O'Neal, because my first thought... Well, actually, about that, since we're going to talk about that Pelicans game, let's stay on that a little bit longer, because I want to ask you one thing, coaching-wise, about that game, too. Willie Green treated it like a playoff game, and to the extent that he benched one of his starters.
He always does.
In the second half.
Yeah. Willie Green is that dude, like we talk about how Ty Lue's that dude, who just...
Yeah.
Jonas Valanciunas, a well-respected veteran starter, who's hundreds of games of NBA experience as a starter, comes in, takes a couple threes in the first 4 minutes of the game. The Suns obviously want him taking those threes. Nurkic is nowhere near him. Willie says, "Fuck this!" Like the threes aren't like complete bricks; they don't have a chance. Willie says, "Fuck this! You're done." 4 minutes into the game. Takes his starting center, you're done. We're not doing that the rest of the game. That's kind of crazy. That's a crazy adjustment to make 4 minutes into the game. Granted, the Suns got up by like 12, 14 points.
It's not that crazy in the playoffs.
No, not in the playoffs, but that's what I'm saying.
Coaches do that in the playoffs.
Regular season, you don't see that a whole lot.
Yeah. And I think what was interesting is Frank didn't, I don't think, treated it like a playoff game in that respect, in that he could have gone small. For example, KD at center, match whatever they're doing with Larry Nance with Kevin Durant and force him to guard Kevin Durant and see if you could find these spaces in between or get the proper switches to create wide open threes on the other end, which, by the way, the Suns did and missed in that fourth quarter. They were creating open threes. They were just missing them in that fourth quarter. So I understand from a coaching perspective, sometimes as a fan, it's all about the outcome. But if we're talking about whether or not they could have created more open shots, well, they created quite a few. They just didn't make them.
Process over results and all that. All that other bullshit that failed coaches say when, no, I'm kidding. there is something to it, but
yeah, there's just a little bit to that in that I just thought it was interesting that he was going all out in that game, which of course they want to stay out of the play-in as well. I'm not sure when Brandon Ingram's planning on coming back, but for them, that extra week of rest would probably be really beneficial to them, just like it would be for the Suns. And the Suns, of course, need every win as well, and I don't think that Frank really pulled out all the stops, kitchen sink type game, coaching-wise, in this one. No. And maybe there's an element of if the Suns end up matched up against the Pelicans in that play-in game, he didn't want to tip his cap to what they can do and give them the opportunity to watch film and prepare for that. And they thought and of course they thought they could win with the starters because there's evidence that the starters have played well against that team throughout the season. So of course there's always that. But it just stood out to me in that Willie Green threw everything out.
If that's
game.
true,
if he threw everything out and it took insane shooting, and that's what it took for the Pelicans to win that one.
The chances that the Suns play the Pelicans specifically in the playoffs are really slim right now, given where these two teams are in the standings.
Yeah,
play-in. Okay.
That's fair. Where it would be.
You're concerned for the play-in. I still think it's silly. You got to win games.
You got to win.
You got to win games.
They really have to win They got 2 LA games coming up. Those
Frank
are
Vogel,
massive games for them.
Frank was asked by the media. I appreciate that the media asked after the game about why didn't you go small. And that was his opportunity to say, we love Drew Eubanks. No, I mean, he didn't. I mean, effectively,
Drew Eubanks can marry my daughter.
Yeah, that's what he said. I mean, Drew is really the new Shaman. They are married, essentially. He said that they want to keep an extra big on the floor to contain Zion. Not that it worked. Zion still had a good game. Now, you could say it worked better than it would have if KD had to handle Zion by himself. That's fair. But
Drew wasn't the problem in that game. Nurkic was arguably more of a problem.
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say they were both equally problems for different reasons. You asked about Drew and his defense earlier. You're right. Drew is not a horrendous defender. But a couple things. First off, the small ball lineup.
He's not a good defender. He's not a great defender either.
The small ball lineup we know works. Does it work against every team? I don't know. You got to try it more if you want an answer to that question.
There's really very little with Royce O'Neal. There's like such little minutes with Royce as a small ball. They did it more before Royce joined the team, funny enough.
A couple dozen possessions is the only sample size we have of the small ball 5 with KD at the 5 and Royce in the game. You toss that out. Couple dozen possessions means nothing. The largest sample size of possessions we have for a small ball 5 lineup, a 5-man lineup that is Booker, Beal, Gordon, Grayson Allen, and KD. Has a sample size of 100 possessions, or just under, which even there is not as much as you'd like to see. Offensive rating of 147. You know what that means? I mean, I shouldn't have to explain to anyone what an offensive rating of 147 means. But maybe you should fucking try that more often. You know, if you have that, use that in situations where you need to win games. And the other thing that drives me crazy about Eubanks specifically, a lot does, but players, they're not looking for him anymore.
No.
They're not even looking at him. Every screen, doesn't matter if it's Devin Booker on the ball, doesn't matter if it's KD on the ball, doesn't matter if it's Bradley Beal on the ball. Nobody trusts him. He has no gravity. His screens, first of all, his screens are okay, but he doesn't pack the same punch as Nurkic, doesn't have the same weight to him, so the screens aren't as effective. And
Nurkic
then after the screen,
awesome screener, yeah.
After the screen is what's more important, because here's a stat, Mike, that I think is really sad and really points out to just how endemic this issue is to every lineup where Drew Eubanks plays. Per Cleaning the Glass, the Phoenix Suns as a team, when Drew Eubanks is on the floor, the entire team shoots 4.7% worse on all mid-range shots. The entire team shoots 4.7% worse on threes. That's all threes overall. And here's the big one. The entire team shoots 7.2% worse on corner threes when Drew Eubanks is on the floor. When Eubanks is on the floor, no one takes him seriously as a threat. Nobody on the offense trusts him enough to pass him the ball. And what that means is the defense can stay home on absolutely everybody else. So every wide open corner 3 you were previously getting is now a semi-contested corner 3. And every, good looking mid-range for Devin Booker, Kevin Durant you were previously getting, where Nurkic was able to knock a guy off and the trailing defender is out of the play, that's now a contested mid-range. So it's not just the fact that Eubanks sucks and only finishes a game with 2 or 4 points. It's that by having him out there, the entire offense is worse. It's a team sport. It's not an individual sport. If you have one shitty guy out there, everyone gets worse. Everyone looks worse by comparison. I know Frank knows this. I know he's not stupid. So I don't understand how this continues to be a problem game in and game out. Is Thad Young the perfect solution to our problems? No. But we
don't know. We haven't seen enough.
You haven't tried. Why haven't you tried?
Yeah.
He looks really good in the one game he played a couple weeks ago. I get it. It's one game. But why haven't you tried? Why are you insisting on the definition of insanity with this team? It makes no sense. Or as I said, go to the small ball lineup. We know the small ball lineup works. It's just when you watch, even though this is largely an optimistic podcast this week, we're happy about the Suns playing their best basketball yet. They've knocked off some good teams. In the past couple games, you could clip together a multi-minute montage, maybe not multi-minute, but several clips of Devin Booker or Kevin Durant directly throwing the ball to the other team because they decided to trust Drew Eubanks that one time and it just did not work. And the rest of the time, here's where you could clip together a montage of multiple minutes, is of them just looking him off after a screen and roll. And just you could see the expression on their faces. I can't give this guy the ball. Takes away everything you're trying to do on offense.
Another thing you can clip together is missed shots by Yusuf Nurkic in that same time. Something we have to talk about here.
He was bad
You're
last
talking
night.
about the idea.
He was
You're
bad.
talking about the idea of one playing Thad Young and two going small. Part of that is Drew Eubanks. Another part of that is that sometimes Nurk is not the right matchup depending on how teams are playing them. And I think in this game in particular, the New Orleans game, which we're coming off of here, they played specifically to try to force the Suns to give Nurkic the ball in the post and then be as physical as possible with him so that he tries to bait fouls, which he did attempt to do, and he did end up playing kind of badly as a result of that. So there are times where you're pulling the plug on a big and maybe trying Thad, we'll say it again, maybe, or just trying to just go to that small ball because of a strategic advantage that you have in that case, which is now Larry Nance is on Kevin Durant. He can't stay in front of him. They're bringing a second guy to him. If they're continuing to switch, now you have Grayson Allen setting the screen for Kevin Durant. Now you have the smallest defender on the other team on Kevin Durant. They have to bring a second guy, and now you're, of course, creating open threes from that alone. But I just want to read some stats because I was looking this up, thinking about Yusuf Nurkic, thinking about how he's played recently, and trying to figure out if there are some stats to just back it up. So, first of all, I want to point out, and I think this is an important thing for him, a net positive in all four of those last wins, plus 19 against New Orleans in the first game they played, plus 8 in the Cleveland game, plus 13 in the Minnesota game, plus even in the last New Orleans game that they lost, he was plus 2. In that game,
because the
where he
other
shot
guy,
28%, by the way.
Because even when Nurk is bad, and I know you're about to read out some bad stats, the other guy who I just talked about is worse. That's why.
Yes,
that is.
so Nurkic is overall a net positive even when he's not scoring. Like, for example, that Cleveland game in particular where he scored 0 points, or I mean, he had 2 points off free throws alone. I think he had 0 field goals made. He was plus 8 in that game and had 10 rebounds and 6 assists, 2 steals. There's ways to benefit that starting lineup in particular, even if you're not scoring. But what I was looking at is trying to look at his overall finishing this season, because I do feel as though it's gotten worse recently. Similar to how he started the year where it felt like he couldn't make a layup at all. And it has, but not quite in the way that I anticipated. So I looked up his finishing by the month. This is his shooting in the restricted area by the month this season. November, 57.4% at the rim. December, 60.7% at the rim. January, 63.6% at the rim.
Decent.
Yes, I remember at this point of the season, you and I talking about Yusuf Nurkic and saying his finishing at the rim has dramatically improved. He's figuring out ways to score within this offense. It's nothing like the beginning of the season. And then it started to go down from there. February, 59.6%, which is still not terrible, but not good for a big. March, 57.9%. And then April, which is just 4 games, in the last week alone.
0.
55.6%, which is the worst of the month so far this season.
Yeah.
And so I looked at that and I said, that is not as bad as I expected. I thought that number was going to be in the 40s for April alone and maybe a lower 50s for March. So I looked into it a little bit deeper. In the last 4 games, so in April, in the non-restricted area of the paint, so in the paint but not in the restricted area, Nurkic is 1 for 13 in the last 4 games. 7% in that area in the last 4 games alone. So if you're thinking about this, if you're watching Yusuf Nurkic this season, and right now, based on the last 4 game stretch, you're thinking about how awful he is at finishing at the rim, that 1 for 13 is probably why. 12 missed shots, 3 a game, really more in the last New Orleans game probably. That's probably why. And in that area on the season, he's not great in general, doesn't shoot a ton of shots in that area, 45% in the paint, not in the restricted area. Not good, but also not like He doesn't shoot it, so it's not like he's awful detrimental to the offense. But that 1 for 13 is why you can't give him the ball when he's too far out. That's the important thing. Yeah. Wait till he's under the basket. If he's off the ball in the mismatch, make him force his way under there. And if he can't, just don't go to him. Don't give him the ball too far out because he can't create from that area. It's just not within his skill set. Let him go back out, set another screen, try to create space with that big body of his, and don't give it to him when he's in that 14, 15 feet range where he can get to the paint, but he's not as agile as you need to be in order to score in that area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, say what you will about DeAndre Ayton, but the one thing we learned from his tenure with the Suns, he had developed this money hook shot that we could just pound the ball to him
on switches,
on switches from 6 or 8 feet out, and he would have that shot 65, 70% sometimes. Like, it was just, you knew it was going in more often than not. Nurkic, we have more than enough evidence to say it's not a viable option now. And so, yeah, you can look at that 1 and 13 number and say, like, oh, yeah, regression to the mean, he'll be fine. No, don't give him the ball yes, there will be regression to the mean a little bit, but also that can never be your offense. It can never be how you choose to run your offense. And the other thing that's been frustrating about it recently, and where Frank, I think, needs to grow a bit of a backbone, a bit of a spine as a coach, if you're giving the ball to Yusuf Nurkic on switches and he's missing those shots, and then to top it off, he's crying to the refs about how he was fouled, and suddenly it's a 5-on-4 going the other way.
Yeah.
You're done, dude. Like, I don't care that you can rebound. I don't care that he is playing better defense lately. You know, he's doing good things. But, like, we're trying to win games right now. You have to be a smarter player than that. And no one is immune from this. We've talked about how KD does this from time to time. Booker does this from time to time. But especially if you're Yusuf Nurkic and you're supposed to have this reputation for being the smart player who does the little things, you cannot afford to sit there and cry to the officials about how you got hit, and that's why you shoot 7% outside of the restricted area, which is not true. Right. And then suddenly the Pelicans have another layup the other way.
And even if
you're not there, you're not there.
Right. And that goes for Kevin Durant and Devin Booker as well, other guys who at times are caught not in transition defense because they were probably fouled. I mean, that's the reality of basketball now, is at times you are fouled, you don't get the call. That's just what it is. And that's going to happen in the playoffs a lot. You know, that's just the history of the playoffs in the NBA. The refs don't call fouls in the same way in the NBA playoffs. So you're going to have to deal with that kind of thing if you're Yusuf Nurkic, or if you're Kevin Durant, or if you're Devin Booker. But in particular, Yusuf Nurkic, who is pretty vital to this defense. If you look at some of the numbers, you need him to get back there and be in the paint to allow somebody like Grayson Allen to have some backline to help him out. So, you know, the other part is you're switching. You're putting a small guy on Nurkic. You're also putting a big on the other side of that. The Suns have 3 players capable of attacking bigs on switches. 3. Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal. Why are we giving it to Nurkic in those scenarios? If anything, force up a shot, and now you have Nurkic with the small guy under the basket fighting for the offensive rebound. You have to allow the stars to do the things that made them stars in the first place. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't, right? But that kind of attacking, that's something that you should do.
You know what that used to be, and this is why it's disappointing maybe that Booker doesn't do it more often, is that was kind of Chris Paul's MO, I feel like. I know I just said that they would dump the ball down to DeAndre Ayton off the mismatch and, like, you know, let him cook a little bit. But then
in the first 3 quarters, yeah.
Yeah, but then in the fourth quarter, if they were switching everything, and this is where I think a lot of the DA stands got pissed off, but it was absolutely the right decision. The Suns didn't trust DA in the post if the double was going to come. So Chris Paul would get the switch, and then he would say, I'm shooting this thing. And you're going to get the offensive rebound because I know you've got a small on you. And guess what? He did. Chris Paul was right.
Yes.
DeAndre Ayton did get that rebound. The Suns need to treat the minutes when they have Nurkic on the floor exactly the same way, especially because, again, even if Nurkic has disappointed us, I just want to point this out one more time. Nurkic will grab an offensive rebound with 2 hands. There are centers on this team who will not do that, okay? So he will come down with it and then go back up or pass it out, and you'll have another 14 seconds. You can reset the offense. Versus, say, who could I be talking about? a center that bats the ball back 60 feet out of bounds, and then it's going the other way for another transition layup.
The Suns are better with Nurkic on the floor. I'm going to say that again. They just are. You look at every stat, every single stat, they're at their best when Nurkic is on the floor. Is that partially because of what happens when he comes off the floor? Yes. Obviously, it's a Drew Eubanks stat as well. But I just want to continue to mention that because I do think you have to be able to talk about what he's good at and also what he's bad at. We've spent a lot of time this year talking about what he's good at. Screening, passing, being a massive body on defense, and I actually think his defense overall has been better than we anticipated it being on the season, just in general. You can't really run an offense through any centers in the post with Yusuf Nurkic. He's just too big, too strong. He's going to impact that in many ways. Also hasn't been in foul trouble as much as Portland Trailblazers fans told us he would be, which is beneficial for the Suns as well. But his finishing is struggling right now. Is it hand injury related? Probably. Is it Ramadan related?
Is it
maybe
dehydration
I don't know.
related from Ramadan?
It could be.
Sure. Yeah. I think
not even water, right? It's right there.
Not even water. This
tweet.
is the stretch run now. We're going to get 3 or 4 games of Nurkic pre-playoffs, post-Ramadan, where we get to test it.
Yeah, it ends today.
Scientifically.
Is that one? Yeah.
Yeah. Tomorrow.
Yeah, so we'll see if that's
tomorrow
helpful.
against the Clippers.
Okay, so there you go. We'll see how it goes for him. I hope he gets back to what he was doing in January, which once again I'll say 63.6%. And a lot of those finishes were sometimes wide open dunks at the rim, but a lot of those were on switches as well, where the Suns were trusting him. It's just in my memory, at the very least, it felt like they were giving him the ball a lot closer to the rim on those switches than they are right now. It's just whatever he's trying to do to get fouled, eliminate that. Just try and go up strong. They'll foul you half the time anyway. Just try to go up strong, especially now that he's shooting bad from the free throw line. Just go up strong and try to score. That's the main thing to do.
It's another good point about the foul line. I know we brought it up a bunch before, so I guess didn't feel the need to today. But as we go into the playoffs and Nurk is playing important minutes, and they know you're shooting like 50% from the free throw line post All-Star break, post thumb injury, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, dude, they're gonna hack you. They are going to hack the crap out of you. So he's got to be prepared for it and ultimately has to make them pay and prove them wrong.
Versus LA, last home game of the season, Tuesday. Back-to-back home and home, so going to Los Angeles on Wednesday on a back-to-back. Kawhi's been out, mysterious injury. We don't know if he'll play either of those games. It seems unlikely, but you never know with that team because Kawhi's injuries are a mystery. And then they finished the season at Sacramento, at Minnesota. Seems like there's a chance at the very least that Sacramento game may not impact the standings, but it could as far as Sacramento feels. It's the second to last game for them. And then that Minnesota game, we've talked about it a lot. Last game of the season on Sunday, April 14th. That's could be huge. It could be a nothing game. We'll find out probably that day or at the very least the night before, since that's an early daytime game for the Suns. Huge and important series of games for them, being that currently they're in the 6th seed right now. They hold it because they own the tiebreaker on New Orleans, thanks to Devin Booker scoring 50 points on them again. And if they win out, they keep it. That's the most most possible way for them to keep it. If they win out, they could even, there's a possibility, a scenario where they move up, past the Clippers if the Clippers lose more games, or if Dallas actually loses games, which right now Dallas is playing unbelievably.
Clippers were not going to catch, I don't think, but Dallas, we're 2 games behind Dallas as of the time of recording here. Both teams have 4 games left. We do not have the tiebreaker because of our poor play against Dallas this year.
So it's unlikely.
And as we've said, Dallas is playing really good basketball right now. But if the Suns went 4-0 and Dallas went 1-3 or 0-4, or if the Suns went 3-1 and Dallas went 0-4, that would do it too. Then yeah, we could leapfrog Dallas for the 5th seed. Unlikely, but possible.
Dallas has some crazy defensive stats over the last few games. I think the last 10 games, teams are shooting under 50% at the rim against them. So there are things that you look at and say, that's not really sustainable, is it? Because that's kind of insane for a team like Dallas who has struggled in that respect throughout their time. But that is something that we're going to keep an eye on. We'll see how the Suns are capable of responding. Do you have any thoughts on those last 4 games before we listen to a voicemail here?
Oh, man. Let's just keep it keep taking it one game at a time, right? What else can we do? Do you want to do tomorrow's game on playback? Should we announce that for people now?
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay, tomorrow against the Clippers on playback. Join us. I'm looking at the standings here. I will say, if we can't leapfrog Dallas for 5th, which again we probably can't, Dallas Clippers is a pretty intriguing 4-5 matchup in the first round for the Western Conference. That would be interesting.
Yes, I think that is not the least interesting one there. That's an option that would be good. Now we are going to listen to a voicemail. We don't have a lot this week that are relevant right now or that sound good. Sometimes sound quality is a problem with voicemails as well. But if you'd like to give us a call in the future, it's 480-420-6553. You can call us anytime, day or night, and leave us a voicemail, and we'll get to it if we can on some podcasts. But we do have one that we wanted to listen to this week. Let me bring it up right now.
Hey guys, my name's Brandon. Been a listener for a year and a half or so. I just had a call because I was listening to Bill Simmons' podcast tonight, and it is fucking crazy. He's suggesting that the Knicks should keep assets to trade for Booker, and I just feel like, can you guys please talk about it? Because I feel like Booker's never leaving. I feel like he's built basketball courts here. He loves the owner. The owner's from Michigan. He's from Michigan. So I just wish you guys could talk about it real quick. Thank you.
All right, Brandon, thank you for sending us that question. I want to say this before we even respond to it. We got 2 voicemails about that segment on Bill Simmons' podcast, and I think I personally got 3 DMs about it the moment it happened. It also was posted on Reddit and Discord. Bill Simmons bringing up once again...
Could not bring myself to actually listen to this segment.
I tried.
I don't know.
I couldn't get through it.
Okay.
I could not get through it. I couldn't. It sounded like, based on what it was described to me as, is that he was just kind of tossing it out there as a possibility, because there's 2 reasons Bill keeps talking about this. The people that run the Knicks right now are from CAA, which is the agency that Devin Booker is signed to for his agent. Now, what that means is that there is this idea that they have a connection to Devin Booker because he was signed to that agency. Is it a good connection? It feels like a stretch, at the very least, from Bill Simmons' perspective, that's something that he'd actually be connected to just based on that alone. But it's there in his eyes. Secondly, they continue to hold on to picks to attempt to trade for a star at some point in the near future. That seems like something the Knicks want to do. And, thirdly, a lot of what Bill Simmons talks about when it comes to the Suns is predicated on him trying to make sure that his prediction on what they were going to be this season was accurate and correct. So him assuming that it's all going to flame out dramatically is the only thing that fuels this. And I feel like that is what it is more than anything. It's this weird sort of backwards take on confirmation bias, where he's saying, I'm going to be right, therefore these things are going to happen.
This is a very common thing you see, particularly among national, not just NBA podcasters, but any sports. Yes, it is confirmation bias. In Bill's case, it is also a way of punching down on a player who is similar in stature to his beloved Jason Tatum. He always needs someone to punch down on in that scenario. We know Booker and Tatum have been compared side by side for years, just as Booker has been compared to, say, Donovan Mitchell or, Zach LaVine, if you want to go back. Anthony Edwards. A million different guys.
D'Angelo Russell when he was on the Lakers.
Danny Green
in the
case of Nate Duncan. Any up-and-coming young wing in the NBA, Devin Booker has been compared to at some point in his career. So that's part of what's going on here. And is what is going to continue to happen with Book for as long as he's on the Suns. Because also, we just know this is the way the NBA content machine works. For years, I feel like a lot of other teams were a little bit off the hook because Damian Lillard was in Portland, and Damian Lillard was always the next domino to fall. Now that Damian
they're trying
Lillard,
to find it.
Now they're trying to find it, right? So now that Damian Lillard is finally in Milwaukee, and by the way, not looking too hot for Milwaukee, but now that finally happened, And some other moves happened in the past year in the NBA. James Harden switched teams again. Pascal Siakam flipped teams. And the entire Toronto franchise as we knew it a year ago is gone. So yeah, pundits are trying to look for who's the next big star, who can generate the clicks, who can generate the outrage, the revenue, whatever you want to say.
What you're saying is that he's a content monster, like just a vampire suckling at the blood of any content he could potentially find because he's desperate for it and he needs it in order to create a series of podcasts and videos about the next star that wants to leave, and he's trying to pin that on Devin Booker, essentially, right?
Well, he knows that that's the reason people listen to his podcast more so than that they want like intelligent basketball analysis. You know what I mean? Like I'm not here to criticize anyone who listens to Bill Simmons' pod. I listen to Bill's pod from time to time. He's a legend in many ways. But he's also kind of a doofus. Like we know that.
Yes.
You know what to expect.
I mean, I feel like that's why a lot of people like him.
You're getting Boston coded takes. That's just what you're doing. Like if I started an NBA podcast and you listened to me and weren't expecting me to be kind of dumb about comparing other teams versus my beloved Phoenix Suns, you would be in it for the wrong thing, right? You would have the wrong idea of what you were getting into. So yeah, that's just Bill's pod. And should we address the part of like, wanting Devin Booker to be a Phoenix Sun forever? Because I think that was the other part of the question here.
Yeah.
I think Book is satisfied with how things are going right now, and I think he knows he has a lot of stock in this organization. He has a really good relationship with the fans. He's got a signature shoe out. And yes, I think he has a good relationship with Ishbia. You never know, though. Just as we're talking about like projecting 10 years, like is he going to be here for the rest of his career? I don't want to put any promises on anything, but as long as he's happy for the time being, that's enough for me.
It seems, based on his career so far, and first of all, what often happens is we talk about stars leaving their teams, and it's usually stars like Trae Young who can, who have been in up and down and in and out, or whatever you want to say. Or there's guys like Pascal Siakam where they're on a team that's not even in the playoff contention. Like we're talking about the Suns right now as a team that has Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. This is not like this disaster situation where he's desperate to leave as soon as possible. It's just not. Can it get there? Yeah, there's always a possibility that things can completely fall apart. It does take two to tango with any trade, and you do have an owner that's unlikely to try and trade a superstar in their prime in Matt Ishbia. He seems like a guy who's going to chase wins as much as possible. But throughout Devin Booker's career, he has been a player who has, more often than not, when the team has struggled, taken responsibility for that and not pointed the fingers at others and try to find someone to blame. And that is the scenario where players want to leave. When they're not saying the Suns don't have any draft picks, now I'm worried about their future. That's not how players think. That's how fans think. That's how Bill Simmons thinks. But that's not how players think. They look at what's right in front of them, which is the players on the roster right now and the coaches that are coaching them, and they think about whether or not they could do what they want to do with that team, which is win. They're not thinking about the future of Phoenix and the lack of draft capital that they have to make moves.
And we only have a draft swap in 2026, and
they don't think that way, and that's how Bill thinks, and that's how they apply whatever that sort of broken brain logic to players, and that's just not how they are. They're more likely to say, I need to be better for this team to be better. And Devin Booker is, at the very least. There are, of course, players who are not like that. James Harden, for example.
Well, but, yeah.
Devin Booker is kind of that kind of guy, and until that changes, I think this is not something that we have to worry about. But the other part of that, I'll mention again, Matt Ishbia owning the team. What makes, and because Bill Simmons said this offseason it could happen, right? Is in Devin Booker could ask to leave, and the Knicks are trying to be ready for that possibility. What in the world would make him think that Matt Ishbia would do that? He would just say no immediately to any possibility of the Knicks throwing anything at the Suns. So it's all this fabricated nonsense to try and create more content in the future. It's almost like this wishful thinking, speaking it into existence so that he could have more podcasts and videos about it. I think it's kind of sad.
I just can't imagine. I can't imagine of the events that would have to take place for something as catastrophic as that to happen this summer. Like, what does Bill think is going to happen? They flame out in the play-in, say, would be the first step, and then like KD asks for a trade in June and then they trade Booker and blow it all up in July. It's just like, it's too many big
with
leaps
no picks of
the
their
same
own.
time.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. It just really, it doesn't. Yeah. And it's just, there's nothing that Devin Booker's ever done to make you think that that's the kind of person that he is. So I think it's nothing to worry about right now. And I think it's just Bill being Bill. I think there are scenarios where Bill says stuff where it comes from a place where he seems to know something. I don't think this was one of those scenarios. I think it's wishful thinking. Yeah. You got anything else before we go on this one?
Don't think so. That was a good question, though.
Yes. Appreciate the voicemail. Give us a call. If anyone wants to at any time, leave us a message. We'll try to get to it. Keep it relatively short. If you'd like to check it out, ethicalhoops.com. We have some shirts. We have some hats. Check them out there. Draft Guy, Not Draft Guy hats. Speaking of draft picks, I'm going to have to buy one for myself and maybe send one out to our friends that are draft guys in the future. And yeah, I mean, the next podcast that we do will be after the last game of the regular season, Sam. We're talking about playoffs after that.
We're talking about playoffs?
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Sign up for our Patreon, patreon.com/thetimeline. We appreciate you all.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, blue label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.